Well, this will be Aaron and my third trip to Israel. We were there in 1993 and in 2013, and it was wonderful. And as part of preparation for the trip, we are going to have a number of group meetings to talk about, I hope, much of what we will experience. We hope to answer all your questions. And tonight, I'm going to take you a real quick run through of some, but not all, of the places we are going. So I have 90 slides and 30 minutes, so it's going to be really fast. But I just want to give a little background. So this is my book.
It is.
That is my book. So this is the view of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And we'll see that in a little over 6 months. It's important if you've never been to Israel to know how small Israel is. It shows you Israel compared to the United States. Israel is about the size of New Jersey. And that's how big Israel is compared to Lake Michigan. From the very south to the very north of Israel is 290 miles. From Jerusalem to Galilee is the distance from Milwaukee to Green Bay. Israel at its widest is the distance from about Milwaukee to Canada. It is not a big country. You drive from south to north in one day. And when we get there, we're going to start out in Galilee, the breadbasket of Israel, around the Sea of Galilee. This is where most of Jesus' ministry took place. The Sea of Galilee is actually a lake. And just here's a comparison. It is about 1/3 the size of Lake Michigan. It's not big, but it is the largest freshwater body in Israel. And it is so very important. Again, Galilee in the north is the breadbasket of Israel. This is where Jesus grew up. This is where the bulk of his ministry took place. We're going to start in Nazareth, which is the hometown of Jesus, a town of about 20,000 southwest of the Sea of Galilee. When we're there, one of the sites we will see is the Church of the Annunciation, which is built over much of Israel. If you've ever been to Greece or Rome or Egypt, where all the big stuff is there, in Israel, most of the big stuff is gone because it was destroyed and built over. This church was built in the 20th century over the traditional site. The traditional site was the Israel of Mary in Luke chapter 1. And so she was going to have a baby. So there's this beautiful church there, and underneath, in the basement of the church, is the actual cave, the traditional site where that all happens. So you'll get to see a lot of these differences. Nazareth is located on a steep hillside. The story is in Luke chapter 4, where Jesus goes and preaches in Nazareth, and he proclaims himself pretty much to be the one God sent. His townspeople want to take him and throw him off cliff. He'll actually just stand on that cliff. So they would try to throw him. They didn't. And just outside of Jerusalem is Mount Tabor, which is the traditional site of the Transfiguration of Jesus. That is also the site in this valley, is the site where the Israelites under the judge Deborah defeated the Canaanite army of Sisera in Judges chapter 4. Later on, we'll see this in the but one of the mountains in Israel. Then we're going to go to Capernaum, which is a small town, was a small town on the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee. According to some of the Gospels, this is where Jesus and some of his disciples were from. And Capernaum is one of those places when you were there, you will be able to say Jesus was right here. We can't be sure of everywhere Jesus was. A lot of it's traditional, but in Jerusalem and Capernaum, there are a couple of sites that you absolutely know Jesus. There is this beautiful synagogue. Jesus was not in the synagogue. This synagogue was built in the 4th or 5th century, but underneath it is another synagogue. They were built in the time of Jesus, and there are a number of stories of Jesus preaching and teaching and performing miracles in Capernaum in the synagogue. It would have been in the building under this building, and it's actually near the left end of the part of the floor cut out, and you can see this all limestone. You can see the black salt. It could have been the floor of the synagogue where Jesus actually stood. You'll get to be there. For me, that's I'm standing. Another place where we can be sure that Jesus was this place. Now, today there's a church built over it, but underneath this church is this strange building, which was originally a house, but in the first century, it's been excavated very thoroughly. In the first century, it was excavated, and that octagonal shape was built around it, and many believe, and period evidence that was Peter's house in Capernaum. When Jesus was in Capernaum, he stayed at Peter's house. There's the story of a paralytic man being lowered through Peter's roof. Everyone was getting telling him he's doing the man. And so this was, it could be the oldest Christian church in the world. Because even in the first century, this had been turned into a ceremonial gathering place. I was inviting early Christians. When it was excavated, they found fish. When it was excavated, they found scratched on the wall. So probably not like Peter himself for the first time. But that too is one of the places where you can absolutely show Jesus was there in this little town called Capernaum. You will be going to the traditional site of the Sermon on the Mount, which took place somewhere outside of Galilee. There is this beautiful church built by Benito Mussolini. It's actually a dictator of Italy in World War II. We'll put that aside. But this beautiful, beautiful church that overlooks the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee, that's kind of unique. It is Galilee. If you think of Israel as brown and desert, Galilee is green and lush. All Capernaum jumps down the hill. It's a very, very small area. We'll get to go to what's called the Church of the Boats and Fishes, which is the site, the traditional site on the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee, where Jesus performed. There's several different versions of the Jesus feeding the multitudes, the few fish and a little bread. This is a church that was built over on one of those sites, and this is actually a mosaic on the floor of this church that dates to, I think, the 6th century. That's a 1600-year-old. When we were there in 2013, we watched the guy fishing on the shore. We're going to go to Magdala, which is the traditional home of Mary Magdalene. Archaeology, and I was an ancient history teacher in college, so I right my history. But But Magdala was actually only discovered about 20 years ago, when someone was going to build a few stores. So they started excavating on the northwest shore of the Sea of Galilee, and what do you know, they uncovered it. And they uncovered this town with about 12,000 people in ancient times, and excavations have been going on ever since. I think they did build a resort off to the side. It wasn't built when we were there 9 years ago. But they found several synagogues, and they also found this. This is a replica, but this is a stone that represents the temple in Jerusalem. And the synagogue in Magdala, they had a representation of the temple. You'll see the Jesus boat. Jesus wasn't actually in this boat, but in 1985, there was a huge drought in Israel, and the level of the Galilee went down. And some guys out walking one day came across the remnants of this boat buried in the silt. And this is a boat from the time of Jesus, from the 1st century. So there's actually a little museum where we're finding those two versions. I know it's not the most impressive in the world, but when you realize this is the kind of boat that Jesus was in, all the stories he was sailing back and forth across. That's one of those boats. And we get to go up to that's part of the plan, right? Go out on a boat and take a little tour. When we were there in 2013, actually had a communion service. It was the only time in my life I said, well, when Jesus was walking along that shore right there, he did this. You're going to see the shore where Jesus walked along. You're going to be on the lake where Jesus spent so much of his time going back and forth, traveling with his disciples, having all kinds of interesting adventures with his disciples. We're going to then go up into the Golan Heights, which is northeast of Galilee. Galilee is a low area, and it is a big hillside, big mountain that goes up the Golan Heights. It's very famous in the last 70 years. This week, it was controlled by Syria before the 6th War in 1967. Israel took it over in 1967. In 1973, the biggest tank battle since World War II was fought on the Golan Heights. Syrians attempted to drive the Syrian forces out, but was defeated. And now the Golan Heights is an area where Israel is building settlements in one of the biggest contested areas. But the Golan is an area, and it was up there, and I'm not sure exactly what we're going to see. On one trip, we actually went all the way to the Syrian border. But violent war in 1948, 1956, the U.S. crisis, 1967 to 73 war, the 82 invasion of Israel to Lebanon. It's been a country. We go to the spectrum of the which is let's mention a couple of times in the gospel story in Mark 8, where Jesus and his disciples left Galilee, went up to the villages near Caesarea Philippi. They were walking along. He asked them, "Who do people say that I am?" That's the first time in the gospel for one of Jesus' followers said, "You are the Christ." Caesarea Philippi was Jewish people. You shouldn't think of Jesus growing up in a Jewish society alone. Where Jesus lived was surrounded by Greek and Roman culture. It was everywhere. Caesarea Philippi was built, and you'll see the ruins. I have a slide of that coming up. It was actually a grotto and a shrine to the god Pan. Okay, the cat, goat, cat, guys who played flute. It was a shrine to Pan, and also this is where King Herod Antipas, the son of Herod the Great, had an enormous talent. And you may have time to wander around the beautiful woods around there, among the ruins of this palace. Beautiful, beautiful, like the streams, fish. It's not exactly what most people think of when they think of Israel. We're going to go to Bethlehem, which was a town only 3 miles from Nazareth, in Israel. A city actually of about 20,000 people. It was a Greek city in Israel. And it's interesting because people wonder, well, was Jesus influenced by Greek culture? Did Jesus speak Greek? And one of the interesting things in Cyprus is this beautiful theater. The Greeks and the Romans, they love theater. The part of the theater you are in Israel. And theater was popular. Now, among the Greeks and the Romans, we're not so sure about the Jews. But one of the interesting things is in the Sermon on the Mount, sorry, my pen's not bigger than Jesus, when he talks about the Pharisees, he says this. So whenever you give alms, do not sound a trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogue and in the street, so that they may be praised by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. Jesus, and of course, he preached, but he uses their word hypocrite. Now, we think of a hypocrite as someone who says one thing and does another. We sometimes think of hypocrites as being two-faced. Well, a hypocrite in Greece was a mask worn by an actor. So when you were an actor, you had a face over your face, and you were two-faced, and you were a hypocrite. And I wondered if Jesus has used a hypocrite here in Matthew 23 when he calls the Pharisees hypocrites. If it wasn't a little personal remembrance of his, perhaps going to separate, perhaps he was misled, but no one what it is. So Jesus was influenced by Greek and Roman culture. We will go to Cana, which, of course, everybody knows the story of the famous Cana in Galilee. We will go to Cana. We have no idea what happened, but there are several churches which claim it. So you'll find lots of places that it's us, here, and you see. After our time in Galilee, we're going to head down the Jordan Valley. We're going to stop at a place called Bethshean, which is one of my favorite places. It is one of the largest archaeological sites in Israel, and it is the city on the top of that hill. That was a Canaanite city from 2000 BC. At the bottom of Bethshean was a fabulous Greek, Roman, and Byzantine city from the 1st century till the year 741 AD. Because in 741 AD, Bethshean was destroyed by an earthquake. And when you are there, you will see the rows of pillars, of columns that have collapsed from the earthquake. And the city was simply later it was inhabited 400 years later by Muslims. But if you want to see a place in Israel that has a lot of stuff to stand, Bethshean, there's another that's some of the ones in Bethshean. Don't do much of that. It's just beautiful. We're going to travel down the Jordan River, the river in Israel. And again, when you think across the street from the Milwaukee River on the last bridge, the last dam, the Bridge Street Dam. And the Milwaukee River, where we live, is about 100 feet wide and maybe this. That's a lot of what the Jordan River looks like. It's not a big body of water, but it is central to not just Jesus' ministry, but to the ministry of John the Baptist, and also the history of Israel, because when Joshua leads the people of Israel into the promised land, they cross the Jordan. That marks the end into the promise. And we'll go to the site. There are several sites that are claimed to be the site where John the Baptist baptized people. One is the very southern shore of the Sea of Galilee. Another is in the middle of the desert, in the middle of nowhere, as you're driving down to the Jordan River. And there is this site now, which is really interesting because on the side where the people are is Israel, across is Jordan. So you'll see Israeli soldiers on one side, Jordanian soldiers on the other side, and all the pilgrims, people who come to be baptized, some people like to get rebaptized. That's extremely don't do that. If you're not a Lutheran, don't do that. One baptism is good enough. And what's really interesting is you drive into this place, you drive through miles of nothing with minefields on both sides from previous times. You might see some signs of you will be safe with that, or you will not get my We're going to stop in Jericho, which is the oldest city in the world. As far as we know, about 10,000 years old. Again, Jericho is famous as one of the great cities of the ancient world. Most people know it from the story of Joshua, and the walls come and tumbling down, and you will actually see the excavations that were there. Archaeologists happening in them. Extensive excavations in Jericho in the 50s and 60s. And Jericho is also going to have a story. We'll get up in that sycamore tree, and he's in a sycamore tree in Jericho, and they say, that's the one. Probably not. But again, you like to know. And from Jericho, we're going to start heading down to the wilderness. And this is the area we need to drive. It is stark and desolate. And I show you this picture because it is a very famous story that takes place on this road. Remember, first line from the American Bill. A man is going from Jerusalem to Jericho. And on the desolate. That's the thinking. That's what this man is. And Jesus would accept it. Then we're heading south. Again, we started up in Galilee. Way up here, we come down the Jordan River to the Dead Sea. Spend some time in the area of the Judean wilderness, which is this area over here. This is the desert area of Israel. The Dead Sea is about the size of Lake Winnebago. It's getting smaller and smaller through evaporation, and also due to the fact that so much water from the Jordan River, which empties into the Dead Sea, is now being pulled up for irrigation. So the level of the Dead Sea has gone down dramatically. It is also the saltiest body of water in the world. We will be staying one night at a resort on the southern shore of the Dead Sea. And if you'd like to go swimming in the Dead Sea, it is the one place in the world you're guaranteed to. No way you can talk to them. Because you can't sing. So I will not be doing that when I was there in 92. I put my water in off that. So, but some people are great with it. I just in the Jordan River, or the Jordan River empties into the Dead Sea. And there's some famous sites we can see in the wilderness. We will go to this in much more detail. One of the places we will go to is Qumran. And this was a settlement from the end of the first century to about the year 70 before Rome. And Qumran was discovered in the 1940s. And Qumran is best known because in a cave, when we're there, you can see where this cave is. Just outside Qumran, 1947, a Bedouin shepherd boy was trying to find flush, and he came to this cave and he threw a rock in, and he heard clinking of breaking his pocket. And he went in, and that's how the Dead Sea story. great debate that they written by the people who lived in Qumran, which was like someone else, but they were hidden away probably to protect the people in the Great War of 70. The Dead Sea Scrolls contain parts of every book of the Old Testament that was Exodus. Probably because the book of Exodus never mentions God. So they didn't get it in there. It includes this magnificent scroll of Isaiah. These are the oldest biblical manuscripts we have. Nothing except for one little silver and the prophet. Nothing was older. We will go to Masada was a mountain retreat. It was the mountain palace of King Herod the Great. King Herod who tried to kill Jesus. A truly horrible, terrible, nasty person. And he built this, and this is on the north slope of the mountain called Masada. He built their castle. And but during the Great Jewish Roman War, Masada was captured by a group of people called the Devil, who held out against the Romans for 6 years. To get to Masada, you get to take the table, which is really nice, because the only other way to Masada is to walk up there. Now imagine in ancient times, everything you needed for this palace had to be brought up. It's called the gold. You get to take the nice table car, and there's a nice little shopping area that flies. So it's not quite as much as it was. But between 73 and 74, the Romans laid siege to the group of about 900 Jewish zealots who fought in the war. And the Romans built camps all around it, circles the side of the camp, and the top still to the outline of the Roman camp. And they built this huge siege ramp outside of Masada. And the night before, the Romans were to break in the Jews. This is a powerful story told by the Jewish historian. The Jews decided they would do a lot, and two other archaeologists that actually found some of those little slave boxes. They have things. And when the Romans reached the wall the next day, they found everyone dead with the exception of a few women. This is where Jewish Israeli military officers come to meet with open service. As they say, never again will it happen. It's a powerful sight. It is truly a beautiful sight. This was started in bloody and awful history, but so much of Israel history started in then we're going to head. And in Jerusalem, you'll see this. This is a model, a miniature model. It gives us a guess of what Jerusalem is. There is a lot of stuff we will see in Jerusalem. We will have some free time too, but there's just so much. We will visit the temple. Right now, on the Temple Mount, this is where Solomon's temple stood. This is where the temple looked like King Herod and Jesus' time stood, both of which were destroyed. Solomon's temple by the Babylonians in 7 BC. Herod's temple by the Romans in 7. We walk Via Dolorosa, which is the traditional path that Jesus walked, that he was taken out of Jerusalem to be crucified. Very popular spot for tourists and the pilgrims, especially for Christian pilgrims who will follow the path, the traditional path that we walk on the field. One of the places I'll go back. We're going to visit the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is the traditional burial spot and site of Jesus' crucifixion, and it may not look like that to us. This is the tomb of Jesus. Now, wasn't he buried? So what is this thing? It's called the Simcat, which is actually just in the last year with remodeled excavations were done around it. It's an amazing place. Because where this site is now, where the church is now, originally, that cenotaph was paid. And through all the centuries, I came here in 1982 after the 2001. This was the big open room, okay? We walked by that area over there, was all open, the fellowship halls, none of that was things get remodeled at the time, right? Things get remodeled. This was the original worship thing. It's the same all throughout the world. So where the Church of the Holy Sepulchre originally was paved, and you actually be able to see in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre because it is huge. What is probably all of it. The field was crucified. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre is controlled by 6 different religious bodies who don't live on the earth. We like to call Christians out of one. In 1723, someone put this ladder up outside. And for something to be done, for any change to be made in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, all the church bodies must agree. It couldn't be what they could do for that. The ladder was stood in 1723. It was stolen a few years ago. When it was found, they put it back because they weren't sure what to do. When we go to Bethlehem, the church community in Bethlehem has the thing controlled by different groups who 15 million bucks back, but this is like all months, just like over. I don't know that. So I'd like to say Christians always take one like that. We have our own as well. We'll also go to the garden tomb. There are 2 traditional sites that Jesus was there. I personally think it's the Church of the Sepulchre. The garden tomb, it looks more like it, doesn't it? That's right. The garden tomb wasn't identified for a while. Like the spot, because outside of it, on the other side, is this cliff, hacked away cliff, and it kind of looks like 2 eyes and a nose and a mouth there. And all of a sudden, the place is tall, and you went, this must be it. So lots of people go there. We're probably going to go to the garden tomb. It's just gorgeous. The Temple Mount, again, the beautiful Temple Mount on which Solomon temple sits today. It's still on the rock. The El Aqsa Mosque, which there has been a lot of, the one on the south end here with the Silver Dome, that's where there was trouble with that couple of weeks before with the violence taking place. What stood there in Jesus' time is all gone, except for the artificial hill called the Temple Mount. It holds up this mountain. When we talk about Zion, that's Zion. Okay, that mountain is Zion. That's a view from the hill. Right? To the east, that's the Kidron Valley. If you go this way, then you go up to Mount Olive. And that's what you call that. This is, again, an artist thought of what Jerusalem might have looked like during the time of Solomon. This temple was built in the 10th century BC, or in the 37th century BC. This is a guess of what the temple may have looked like at the time. And that temple was still being constructed when it was destroyed by the Romans. The Dome of the Rock now is centered on the Temple Mount. This is built by Muslim authorities in the 6th or 7th century AD. And inside of it is this rock, this big rough rock. Because to Jews, this is the spot where Abraham sacrificed Isaac. To Muslims, this is the spot where Muhammad rode his horse to heaven at the end of his lifetime. And some believe that this rock was actually the Holy of Holies in the temple. Jesus' day, and I have another story to share, and then information about it. The Wailing Wall, which you all see pictures of, this is the western wall, the retaining wall of the Temple Mount. Those huge, they're called ashlars. That was built by King Herod the Great, king who tried to kill him. He had a couple of questions here. This is where Jews go to pray, because devout Jews will not go up on the Temple Mount for fear they may accidentally step into the Holy of Holies. Last season. So devout Jews, they go to the wall, they touch the wall with the part of it, but this is there, there's a spot where there's a curtain going here, and then on this side, and then on that side. And if we're there, you may see some of that. And that's the whole area. The plaza around the Wailing Wall. The temple was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. They destroyed everything on it. And these are piles of rubble from when the Romans tore down everything on top. Don't do that. Still existing to this day. Some very interesting archaeological stuff. This is the southern of the Temple Mount. And it's closed up now, but there are a series of arches where pilgrims, the 3 the arches here, the torches here, where pilgrims in the time of Jesus would have walked up these steps to go into the temple. If you want to go someplace where Jesus actually was, he would have probably walked up a set of stairs. What's interesting about the stairs is they are different sizes. That's to keep you from running out. Slowly and deliberately. Again, that's what it looked like in the first century. Fairly there. This huge red particle, that's probably the type of Jesus spoke about. And there were various courtyards of the temple. The outer one was for everybody, women, children, foreigners. The next one was for foreigners and Jews, and the last one was for the Romans and the Romans priests. Don't think the people in these times that worship in the temple. The temple was exclusively for the priests. The Holy of Holies, in the Old Testament, where the Ark of the Covenant, the high priest went in with if you're adventuresome, underneath the Temple Mount, there is this was a road in Jesus' time out underwater, underground. You can go walk there. My wife did not do it. She probably go there. It was a very interesting place to go. Something new since I was here is excavations to the south of the Temple Mount in the area called Luggage. And these excavations we now believe were probably where the king had his palace in the first temple time. Of 600 feet. And so extensive excavations have been done there. They have found little clay seals. In ancient times, you could write your name on documents that seal, and you press your seal into that document. And they have found, they found one seal who had high. They found seals for others who were mentioned in the Bible. But we think this area, and we should be able to go there, was where the boy, administrators, those who work for the king, they all. We go to the Mount of Olives. I know there's a lot of questions. Mount of Olives is where Jesus spent time when he came to Jerusalem, the last week of his life. The Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus was arrested. These trees may have actually been pulled out. Some of them are. And so this is the spot where Jesus would have prayed where he was arrested before he was killed. And also from the Mount of Olives, Jesus rode down the Kidron Valley and into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. So who actually gets to walk this traditional site, but probably a pretty good chance. The roads don't paint for that. Probably the actual Catholic Jesus palace. A couple of things. One of the things we will have up to see is the mission. In Hebrew, and it's the Holocaust. This group is dedicated to pictures of the Holocaust. Starting in my head. And that's why this bill is so strong on that. They never again. They're determined to never go. You'll also have time to shop. It's not all archaeology. The food in Israel is absolutely wonderful. We'll have 3 times in Jerusalem, which I hope will be a high point for everyone. It's time to wander around in Jerusalem. Then our last stop is the Caesarea Maritima, which is on the Mediterranean coast. A huge city built by King Herod. This is the Hippodrome. That's the horse racing track in there. This is what it looked like in ancient times. This is another one of those places where if you're not Jesus, but the Apostle Paul was, King Herod, not King Herod who tried to kill Jesus, but one of his sons, had a palace up there with a built-in swimming pool. There it is. That was his palace. That's his swimming pool. And that's so important because the Apostle Paul was over that. So he was in prison. He was in prison at Caesarea Maritima for 2 years. Again, that is the place. You'll also get to see the beautiful aqueduct that King Herod built, runs 17 miles from Mount Hermon all the way along the coast, bring water. Just a lot more, a lot more to share with you. We will be putting more on the website probably. We'll share, if you find a video you'd like to watch, encourage you to read, the more you can talk about, think about, get acquainted with what you do, the better you enjoy your future. So, thank you very much for sharing that. I got a couple other things to go through with you here. Just a few things for you. Travel. Clothing. I didn't get you up twice in late October. It was gorgeous. We had perfect weather both times. It was shorts and t-shirt, and it's hot. And you need to drink a lot of bottled water. You can drink tap water. Right? Yeah, you're better off with bottled water, the tap water. There are some spots where men must wear pants, long pants. Some places where women must have their shoulders covered. We'll talk more about that coming up. Make sure you have comfy shoes if you're going to do a lot of walking. And if you ever get to a spot where you go, nah, I don't think so, you don't have to go. You want to stay on the bus if it's a day where maybe I'm just going to stay at the hotel today. We'll talk more about that. We're not going to go. But please do know that you will be doing a lot of walking. It's your choice of what you do. And one of the things we'd like to do is, maybe not every day, but a couple of times during the trip, after the day, after supper, after you get back to the hotel before dinner, is just have an informal time with the next one. Just to sit and talk and eat, drink, and share and ask questions. And if you're someone who likes to have a drink, have a drink. And just on night, we did that on our last trip to Greece 4 years ago. And it was a wonderful time. So we hope to do that as well. And then just one last thing, prepare to be flexible because we never know what's going on. Okay. So our flight to Greece 4 years ago, we got to Chicago, and guess what? They were having storms in Toronto, and we weren't sure we were going to get there. So be flexible. Okay. So thank you all very much for listening to all I share there. And again, several more sessions where we can talk about the things.
We had a phrase on our mission trips, our youth mission trips, we'd say MARF, maximum, absolute, rigid flexibility. So that was our little acronym that we came up with. So flexibility is a good thing because we'll have these opportunities, and a year we'll know exactly what's going on in the country. And it can be one of those things where it's like, you know what, we're going to adjust the schedule today because if we adjust it a little bit here, we'll get to do this. And so flexibility is a good thing on these trips. All right, so that's good. We just wanted to cover a couple of things. You all know the cost of the trip and things like that. There are always a little bit of extra things. We work in the tips, just so you know, so you won't have to come up with tip money. You're always welcome to give more. If you really feel you want to, that's up to you. But we've worked it in, so it's already been in. But I had the opportunity to talk with my son's girlfriend's parents. They just did a trip to Israel, so I wanted to hear how it went for them. And by the way, we're having a much better trip than they will have. They spent 3 days on the coast, and I'm like, on the coast. I don't know why you sat there for 3 days. Anyway, and they also had rain the entire time. So we will have beautiful weather. We've ordered it ahead, so you know we've got the right people to do that. But a couple of things that came up. We've already mentioned in our materials that you'll need to get your own trip insurance. Okay, that's really important because, as we know, life changes. We've learned that the hard way in the last 2 years, and so because of that, we really want to make sure everyone has trip insurance. Now, we're not going to purchase that for you. You need to purchase that yourself. You don't purchase it until your check is actually handed in. Your checks will not be deposited until August 1st. You will not buy trip insurance until that happens. Okay? But you can start to look into it if you want. One of the companies I've used before is Travel Guard. You're welcome to use any company that you would prefer. We're not gonna, it's up to you. You can work with your own insurance company. I'm sure they'll sell you insurance. I'm sure AAA will sell you insurance, all those kind of places. But you're going to want to have a good company that, it seems to happen almost every trip. Somebody right before the trip gets hurt in some way. You know, I've had it where someone was mowing their lawn and fell and just ripped open their whole knee, and they weren't going to Israel. They were supposed to come, and then of course their spouse didn't come to Israel too. So that kind of thing, where you can then go back to the insurance company and say, the travel insurance company, and say, you know, this happened, here's my doctor's note, and they'll cover your costs. So you're not suddenly out, you know, a huge amount of money, which you really don't want that to happen. So having trip insurance is really important, especially also with COVID. You know, we're really hoping by 6 months from now, we'll be like, what was that called again? COVID? Really? Did we go through that? That's what we're hoping for. But I asked my son's girlfriend, you know, what was the experience for them? Insurance is, I'm sorry, COVID is Israel is one of the most strict countries in the world when it comes to COVID and all the protocols. So when Omicron was just being mentioned, they shut their borders immediately. So before we were even getting to that point, they just shut their borders. That's kind of where they're at. So imagine if suddenly we're about to go and everything stops. That's where trip insurance comes in, and we can point to that and say we're covered. But they experienced this. They left. It's been about 3 weeks since they did this trip. So obviously it's still pretty fresh still for them. Hopefully, like I said, in 6 months when we go, they'll be like, yeah, we're past that. But they had to prove with a company's COVID test, PCR test, they had to go and have that professionally done. They had to prove that to get on the plane to go to Israel, okay, which cost about, you know, when you do it professionally, it's about $100. Right? So they all had to do that the day before so they could prove it. Then when they got to Israel, they had to do it again and prove it in country. They made you wait till you got your results. So that was another $100 in country. So, you know, I want to make sure people understand that that's something that could possibly be something that we have to do. I would say if we went tomorrow, we probably wouldn't be doing that. But hopefully in 6 months, it'll be like, yeah, we're fine, you know. So I just want to make sure people are aware of that. I don't know if anybody's heard of this in the news. Have you heard that the cost of living has been going up? And anybody hear that? Have you noticed anything? Well, when we set up the trip, the way that they always say is every trip we've done, they say, here's the cost of your airline, pending, you know, fuel charge increase and tax increase on the fuel. So guess what? We're probably going to have a little bit of an increase that goes with that fuel cost increase. We're guessing that would be 50 to 100, you know, per person, I'm guessing. So it's just the fuel cost addition. So hopefully it won't be that bad, but you should be aware that that will be something that we'll probably have to kick in a little bit more for. We will work to get you from, we'll park cars here at St. John. We'll get a shuttle bus, take us all down there, drop us right at the gate, and make it real easy for us. Pick us up from the gate, coming back. We'll have two of those different buses because we'll have one group that will come back at the originally scheduled time, and another group that with Istanbul will stay a little longer. But there will be a cost that goes with that. That's an additional cost. If you have somebody that you'd rather have drive you down there, that's up to you. If you're Chicago, O'Hare. So driving from here to O'Hare. In the past, it's been between 50, 60. We're guessing 75 now with costs going up a little bit and that kind of thing. That's I believe that's a round trip, 75. Right. If everybody gets their own way down there, then two of us will end up paying a lot of more money. It ended up being with everybody about, probably, what's that? I think that was round trip. Yeah, because I know 1 year was only like 25 per trip, so 50 total, but it'll be more than that. That was 10 years ago. So, but it'll really help. You can park your cars here. It gets us right there. We're all together. We just walk right in. We're not parking cars or anything like that. It's a lot easier. So we will be doing that, but that's not in the trip cost. That's a little bit extra. I have created a page on, that website that I created for you to register, get information, that kind of thing. I also did a back page that's not on there And you've got the link here. I actually gave you a little bit of a tiny URL, so you didn't have this long thing. But it's what we're trying to do is have a place where we can put a lot of this stuff. So you can go and look for it. We'll have the travel information. So when we have the official word from the airline, here's the actual flight numbers and the time and blah blah blah. We'll have it all right there. I've been putting in all sorts of information about Sepphoris, and there'll be a place where you can go and do a little research. Jody found a couple good books. I put those in there, listed them, so if people want to buy a book from Amazon. You want to talk about that a little bit? Want to mention it? The book?
I like the book, because one starts to where it says, and where to eat. It was discussing each location, more locations than what we're going to. And then it's the reference.
A little bit more devotional versus just, you know, what to eat at your breakfast. Right? That kind of thing. So, so we'll have, there's a bunch of stuff that'll be in there, and we'll keep putting things in there. So if you want to, there'll be one place you can go to find the information about the trip. Okay, so I've got a link there for you. You can take a look at it. And I mentioned the book resources. Any questions on those kind of things? We're going to call on Gail next to tell us about the excursion, and you're also going to talk about the airline schedule. But before that, are there other questions people have? Yeah. Okay.
Is it a year or a year, someone's gonna like track, violence history and, before we go to, still go or no go?
Right. So you might answer that question in terms of safety, and typically we go to the state department of resources. They're the ones that are watching more carefully than Ayers a business person, so you wouldn't trust Ayer on that. You would trust the state department. Ayers is going to want you to come no matter what. So, he's a wonderful guy, but he's business. So, you know, you trust the State Department on that. If they're saying, no, you cannot go, then that's true. But, yeah, so that's probably more than
One of the things I share, and this sounds really weird, but I have never felt safe with anywhere in Israel, because everybody's got guns, and and that sounds stupid, but people are trained. Just so you know, it's a safe place. There's not been an attack on Western people. Nobody wants to hurt us. There's not been an attack on Western people. So it is a safe place. We felt very comfortable going out. There's a quest going on in the Defense Mountain. That will be monitored, and if the places that are a little disconcerting, we can reevaluate. We are not going to move out of, so we won't be there. But I just want you to know, we have always here. So I don't want anyone to think about that. What's going on now happens sometimes during COVID time, especially because we didn't have a time, one place at one time. When we're there, there's nothing going on. Yeah, so that's fine, that's fine. We want people to feel comfortable.
Will we be having any security people going with us? We just got access to visa, and there was the security person traveling, you know, to all the places. No issues, really.
When we were there in 13, we started.
Going to Bethlehem.
And you look easy in our military, especially.
But no one traveling.
No, we had it in Georgia.
I tend to feel safer if you go around to go on. Yeah, and we will have those opportunities. We'll have the time at the end of the tour day. The tours typically end at around 5. You know, it's approximately when we have dinner. But we'll have that chance for if people want to debrief and talk about it. I usually do a little bit of that as well as we're driving back, you know, because it's famous end of the day speech to remind us what we saw so that we never forget, kind of thing. And but then even after that, you're welcome to just crash if you want, or if you're like me and you're like, what more can we do? Let's go. And you know, we did a wine night at the King David Hotel, out on the beautiful veranda looking over the old city. You know, there's different things you can do at night too, which is a lot of fun. So there'll be that. I tell this story, I've told this in sermons before. Two minutes. The story, we went out one night, I think it was about 4 of us together. We're walking back, it was probably 9:30 at night, and a lady came up to us in the street. And so it was a little bit darker street, it wasn't really dark, but the street lights on. And this woman came up to us and said, "Are you American?" And we said, "What gave us away?" You know? And I thought we fit in pretty well. And we said, "Yeah." She said, could you help us?" And we're like, "Okay, what do you need help with?" "Help my refrigerator lights on, come and turn it off." And it was one of those like, okay, this is a scam, I think. And she said, "It's the Sabbath. I'm not allowed to turn off our refrigerator. Like, you're not allowed to affect the energy of the universe, right? If you click a switch, you're affecting the energy of the universe." And we were kind of looked at ourselves. We felt pretty good about ourselves. We could take it, you know. We feel confident. So we went with her. We ended up going up about 3 flights of stairs into her apartment, and the stair lights were off, you know, because they weren't turning the lights on. And it was one of these like, hey, we get into her apartment, her mother's there, her sister's there. It was a very, very wonderful family, and we had a nice conversation. Sure enough, the refrigerator door is wide open, and the little tape button had come off of the little button to keep the lights from going on and off whenever they open the door. So we put the tape back on, shut the door, and we left. And it was one of those wonderful experiences. Like, oh, it was really nice. We had a really good conversation. I'm not recommending that you just go into random people's apartments. I'm not good. But again, I felt extremely safe, you know, and it was that way. But you know, I think there was one other time the rockets were firing down near the Egyptian border, that kind of thing. And so you start to go, huh? But nothing would come anywhere near where we would be, where church would be. And again, every person in Israel has to serve in the military. So every person, I think it's a 3 years term. And so women and men, everyone has to serve. So they all understand security. They all understand chain of command and following orders, and you do what you're told, and if you know all of this. So it's one of these systems that's just very secure, and people are thinking about those kind of things. So it'll be very safe, and it's a wonderful choice. Other questions people have? Yep, that's Gail next. She's next. She's going to talk about that. Any other questions before Gail? Come on up.
When you said that they're included, what is
What's that?
hotel,
Tips.
restaurant?
When you said tips?
Yeah.
So we have, why don't you talk about tips?
They're included.
But what kind of tips, Gail? What kind of tips?
I'm not, as Chris said before, you know, selling wine.
Right, but what are they including? The meals, the hotel, the drivers?
The tips include the guide, the bus drivers, the hotel staff, which includes meals. And I think,
Everything we ever would normally tip for.
right.
But it's the
right.
kind of thing that if you love the service in your room and they made the little swans out of your, and you thought that was just the most wonderful thing, you can put another dollar down. Sometimes the bus drivers are so good that, you know, they were so much fun. You're like,
And it's so much easier to just have that on the guide. Okay, so, I'm gonna call it the post-pandemic blues with the airlines. They are having trouble getting their act together. And we've been kind of riding the wave with them. We are flying on Turkish Air. The schedule, did you publish the schedule in the,
I don't know.
on the website at all?
I don't know if I did because it was up in the air and I didn't want to
But, okay.
have people start handing it out to people.
We will publish the schedule as soon as it is firm. But I think every time you go on a trip, you should have a surprise, and I never surprise you. You don't have to wait until November 8th. You're going to be leaving on November 7th, a day early. So this is what I call the post-pandemic blues. The airlines over there are not, they struggle with a little bit more because there's so many different countries involved, and every country has their own rules. Here, our airlines are running from New York to Los Angeles to Houston and Chicago, and it's easier for them to work out the schedule. Over there, it's a little more complicated. So by rearranging the schedule, Turkish Air has scheduled us to fly on the 7th of November instead of the 8th. We hope that something can happen specifically, and we will arrive back on the 17th instead of the 18th. This is real.
Oh, we lost Greg. We lost Greg.
And if you are going to do the extension, we are working, this is our little hump to get over right now. The extension, we can move from one departure time from Jerusalem to, or from Tel Aviv to Istanbul, and then we can move back to another time. They're working with Turkish Air fervently to get it established and decided. You will go, you will do the extension. You may be flying with the group that is going home to Istanbul and arriving at 4 o'clock in the morning in Istanbul. In this case, you would probably be taken to your hotel. This the sellers, if you want to do that, and probably we would have a half-day tour on that first day. On the other hand, it may be a schedule where you don't leave Tel Aviv until 3:30 in the afternoon, which in this case you get into Istanbul just after dinner hours, and you would never leave here. So we will keep you informed. That's pending right now, and it will be back. Okay. So, surprise, you get to leave it.
You know, can I have you stand next to the microphone a little bit better? People are having a hard time hearing you. You just stand right here.
You want me back here?
Yeah, just right next to it.
Oh, all right.
Is that better, everyone on Zoom?
Okay, we'll try to speak up a little bit. Okay. All right. I think that really,
So with
that
Istanbul,
really
what day
covers
would we
it.
get home?
Hmm?
That's what you're asking, John. So she's asking on what day would we get home?
you would be coming back home on Sunday, the 20th. So departure on the 17th, back home on Sunday, the 20th. You would get back home, you would get back to Chicago at 6:05 p.m. on the 20th. So you leave on the 20th and you get home on the 20th. Going the other way, you leave one day and get there the next day. So we have had a good response for the Istanbul Extension. The cost approximately, don't quote me on this, but they did send me an approximate, will be about $700 to $800 per person. So that would be the night of the 17th, the 18th, and the 19th. So it would be 3 nights. At least one full day of touring, possibly a day and a half, depending on how the flight schedule works out, and then a day on your own. If you don't feel comfortable being on your own, Istanbul is very easy to be on your own, especially in the old city where we would be. If you don't feel comfortable, or you think, oh, I'd really like to get a guide and I'd really like to expand and do some other things, the hotel can make that possible for you, or the tour group that we're with can also make that possible for you. So you can decide how comfortable you are.
The question is it a direct flight from Chicago to Istanbul and Istanbul back to Chicago?
Yeah. And then you go from Istanbul to Tel Aviv and Tel Aviv to Istanbul. Yeah.
You will know exactly, yeah, your full day tour obviously will be in the old town and will be Hagia Sophia, the Blue Mosque, the markets, which are, if any of you like to shop, we've got it made in the shade. It is a fun place. And it's not just about the shopping, it's about seeing how the markets are laid out. I mean, the Middle Eastern markets are just unique and they smell wonderful with all the spices and everything. It's just delightful.
What money do they use? Euro or currency, or what currency do they use?
You can use American dollars and visas all over the place. Ditto in Israel. We never get shekels on our trip. They love US dollars, so you'll be fine. You'll be fine with that. And your visa. Yes?
The visa and such.
Oh, boy,
Apple Pay, I'm not sure about.
I'm not
So
sure about
they're
that.
technologically usually superior to us, and, I would hope they would. Apple
Why
Pay,
don't I write that down as a question to ask?
yeah.
That's a good question.
What's that? I would guess they're gonna take almost all forms of credit card.
If you
Maybe
have
not
any
just
problem with a credit card, it will be American Express. If anybody is in distance, you might see Visa and MasterCard and Discover and and you might not see American Express on their, list of things that they take. That's usually the only one we've ever noticed, is a little bit. No, no, but you can. You obviously can if you want to change your money into shekels, you can. But no, I've never gotten shekels. That dollar is, well, maybe the dollar won't be so strong when we go.
Do they give you change in shekels or do they give you change in dollars?
They'll give you change in dollars. Unless it's a real small little market, or a little place where you decide to get some falafel or some fruit or ice cream cone. If it's a real small little place, they may give you change in shekels. But then that's called being flexible and understanding. You won't lose a lot of money that way.
Staying the same 3 nights that we in Istanbul. If we arrive at 4:30 in the morning, it's still 3 nights. As opposed to arriving the other way at 30 or something.
So yeah, there'll be 3 nights. What we're trying to figure out is, so the group that's coming back to the US leaves at 1 a.m. They have to be at the airport 3 hours early. So 10 p.m. we have to drop them off at the airport. We can just get on that flight with them and go to Istanbul, which is the layover spot for the group that's coming back to the US. We can just do that. And then we're into Istanbul. Or the other option is we just go find a hotel and take a flight the next day at 3 p.m., which means we would probably do like a half day in Jaffa or Tel Aviv. And that becomes our half day time, which, is a little bit more restful, but then you're not getting into Istanbul till later the next day, which really is the day's shot there. You're pretty much going to have dinner and maybe a little bus ride around, then you go to bed. So the debate is, it almost seems, we're not sure which way it's going to work out. We're working that out.
We're really at the mercy of what
the airline.
Turkish Air will give us for that extension. We're at the mercy of Turkish Air. We
that's
think
one of the nights.
it might be nicer to do it this way or that way, but we really don't have that much of a choice. We
No,
can
we don't
express
go
our
through.
feelings.
You came back to the US?
No, and we go the next day, we
Yeah.
will be going to Istanbul on the 18th.
Yep.
The 18th would be a night.
No, you would not be going to Istanbul on the 18th. You would
Yeah,
be going
because
on
they
the
arrive
17th.
in country.
The group would leave at 1 o'clock in the morning. We would leave at 3:30 in the afternoon or something like that, if that was an option.
17th,
That's
18th, and
still
19th, 3 nights, whichever way, right? Whichever way we're.
Well, if we're arriving at 4:30 in the morning, what day would that be?
The 17th.
But that wouldn't be considered a night.
Yeah, it kind of would be a night on the airplane, and you would get into the hotel earlier in the morning. That's called flexibility. I mean, I know
We're
it's
figuring it
not,
out. We're
it's
figuring
not
it out.
ideal, but
That's
yeah.
not something like 3 nights.
We'll give you all the details when it kind of firms up at the end. So, because we don't even know the exact cost yet, but we're working hard to make it happen. But yeah, so that either way, we'll be in Istanbul. That's the whole. So. Any other questions?
That's all I have. Yeah.
So we've got the COVID protocol on the way out. What about on the way home? Get on the airplane and then say, oh, you got COVID, are we stuck in Istanbul for people?
That's where your trip insurance happens. Then hopefully, yeah, if you got stuck there, your trip insurance covers you. Yeah, that kind of stuff.
So there's the same thing on the way.
As of right now, yes.
With the hotel, can someone come in and do COVID insurance? Is that what they do? Our last night, they came in like in the afternoon, and we have with our passport information on that, and then we have people like that.
It was like immediate. It wasn't. Yeah.
I mean, right now, we're 6 months away, so because things are gonna change so much, hopefully, for the better. Hopefully, by that time we get closer, that's how.
My neighbor Gail has just traveled. Gail, can you update us on her?
The United States is still requiring. So there's still facilities around in locations. There are less places that you can still be tested. The only other thing is that we got back last night and yesterday. And I know it's not November and that's a long way off, but I will say we arrived in O'Hare at 4 in the afternoon yesterday. And to get through passport control was a 2-hour line. There's something called global entry, some of you may have that. That was just, when I had that, and you just literally just walk through. My 91-year-old father was with us, and that he had to stand in the regular line. It was a 2-hour thing, but he had his certain freedom, and someone actually noticed it, that he shouldn't be alone, and got him out of line. But global entry might be something we look into. Again, it's an additional cost. It requires an interview at the Homeland Security Office. How long is it? It's 5 years. So, depending on how much you sell, but it was a 2-hour wait. I've never seen it. So, in November, no. But the U.S. is still requiring.
Don't buy your Thanksgiving turkey ahead of time.
We're gonna have at least 2 more meetings before we go. And especially the last meeting becomes like, okay, now we're going in a couple of weeks, and this is how this is gonna work. That's where it really comes down to exactly this. We'll have the trip information much sooner than that, but how COVID's gonna work and all that kind of stuff we'll have a much better sense at that point.
How many of you sitting here right now think that you're probably going to do the Istanbul Extension? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. You add to the stream 6. Yeah, right.
Well,
it's
and
probably,
I think I'll probably send out that whole survey again if people can tell me.
right.
Just so we can, especially once we have the actual details. This is the actual cost. It's now $5,000 to do it Istanbul. Then nobody's going to Istanbul. Or it's $400. 32. You want to say anything about that?
No, you can talk about that.
So we have, So we were pretty amazed how quickly this trip filled up. I mean, honestly, we didn't tell anybody. I mean, honestly, yeah, seriously, we didn't. I was all set to put. We told a couple people, and all of you told each other, which is almost embarrassing because we were like, "Well, I wish I had known." I'm like, "I'm sorry." So, and honestly, this trip cost is really good. My son's girlfriend's parents, their trip was $6,000 per person, and you didn't see anything. I'm like, "You didn't see anything." Anyway, I didn't want to tell them that, but so it's a good trip. Because we do want to really emphasize, we know your deposit's not being deposited until August 1st. So it gives everybody a lot of flexibility. The problem with that is we really do need to know who's coming. And we really do we need to have 33 people. So it's the kind of thing, if you're like on the fence, you're saying, well, I think I'll make my decision August 1st or July 31st. We need to know that sooner than later. So we have had other people that are talking about, we have friends that have mentioned it, and a couple people that online as well that want to come. So we've said we're trying to come up with a few more seats for those that want to come. And if you're the kind of person that, if you're already thinking, yeah, I'm not going to go, we need to know that so we can tell people, yeah, we for sure have a spot. Otherwise, we have to find a few more. It's really the airline that's the issue, finding more airline seats. Or if you're the kind of person you've got 1 million points and you want to use them you pay for your own seats, and that becomes a different, what do they call that, land only, I think they call it, right? A land only cost, that's another way to do it, and we use those seats for the people that are extra. So we're kind of adding a little bit of a waiting list, but we're also working to get those people on the trip. The bus holds 55 people, the coach bus, so we've got lots of room. We like to have room for everybody to spread out a little bit more. That's always nice. But we can take, 40 would not be a problem. So I don't think we'll have 40. I think we'll be probably right around 33. So. Luggage, one carry-on, one suitcase. Yeah, you get your backpack, you get a carry-on, and you get your luggage. It's typical thing, yeah. And remember, there'll be people helping us at the hotels and that kind of thing. But there will be some, you have to move it a little bit yourself. So if you're bringing two, and even if you say, I'll just pay for it, you're not going to want to do that because it is not going to be that. So that's something to think about. But yeah, don't help us. One special thing that I'm kind of excited about, we're starting in Nazareth. That'll be our first hotel. I've never been staying there, so I'm excited about that. We're also doing something special where we're doing a night down at the Dead Sea. So it's always been where we rush down to the Dead Sea, but we went to the Red Sea, we got in the water, anybody on the swim, but then you're all kind of wet, right? And you're salty. Even if you wash off, you're still salty. And it was always kind of like, okay, now I'm in wet clothes, the rest of the day. This is gonna be really nice because we're staying at a resort at the Dead Sea. So you can put your stuff in there, you can go swim, come back and clean your stuff off and dry yourself off. It's gonna be much more comfortable. I'm excited about that as well. So. Temperature-wise, it's a little bit cooler.
Late October, it was in the 70s in the desert, so a little cooler. But we're in the dry, still in the dry.
Yeah, it's getting a little bit cooler at that time, so it won't be.
They're just some religious sites. A couple of us went to the Temple Mount in shorts, and they made it this week. So, well, I think I will probably let you know in advance.
Yeah, every day. Every day we'll talk about, okay, tomorrow this is what's going to happen. This is what you could bring. I don't think there's any place because if you went up on the Temple Mount, you probably would.
But I don't know that we will go in the mosque.
I've never gotten to go in the mosque, but in Turkey.
Very little, especially
Very true. Have you gone to the hotel at the Dead Sea?
Yeah.
Was it still rocky at the lake?
Yeah, I had flip-flops. some people wear their tennis shoes, they drive in. It's so hot in there. Well, it might not be. Well, down at the bottom of the Dead Sea, it's gonna be pretty nice. That's a neat experience. I mean, it's kind of like R and R, and then you've been going hard and, you know, traveling, and then you just have that.
Other questions that people have right now? I know you'll come up with a whole bunch more later, but. Converter, yeah, you do definitely convert. I believe it's European. It's the two, I believe, if I'm correct. So, but their power system's pretty good. So it's not like when I went to Tanzania and I flew off the wall of the first night. I mean, literally fire going up the wall. Like, this isn't good. So they have a good power system. You just have to use a converter. So yeah, they've got. I'm sorry. Do you have questions up there? We're turning our backs on you. Hello. Do you have questions? Anyone? You can put your mics on if you want. Butch, you have a question?
Mine have all been asked.
Okay, great. Anyone else? Could you hear okay up there most of the time?
Most of the time, yeah.
I'll take that as a no.
Yes,
I think there's a delay, is what it is. So I hope it should have been recording the whole time, so I will put that recording up on YouTube, and I'll put a link out for everyone, for those that missed it, or if you want to go back and try to figure out what was said at a certain place or whatever. So you're happy to send us questions at any time. We're happy to answer them. And anything else you two have?
As soon as the airline schedule comes out, I'll have, I'm going to send it to all of, you know, an email to everyone so that you've got the airline schedule.
Yep. Yeah, and once we get the assembled details, we'll know exactly. But I mean, just so you all know, everything moves up one day, which in a lot of ways, our goal was to be away from Thanksgiving. So it's actually helped us that much more. And it actually made it even easier to do Istanbul if you want to, because you're that much further away from Thanksgiving. So it's going to be an awesome trip. It's been one of my favorite trips. There really is something about being in the Holy Land where there is a sense of like, yeah, Jesus would have been here, and to realize that. But it also changes your whole vision of the Bible and the stories when you're sitting in church and you're hearing the story, and you're like, I know exactly what this looks like, you know. And they're out fishing on the Sea of Galilee. You're going, yep, did that. You know, I was out there. It really does. It just affects how you hear the scriptures, how you can envision it, close your eyes and see it, and you know. So it's a powerful trip.
It's the only trip that you will be on that you will think about every single week. If you happen to be at church every single week.
So go to church.
Yeah.
We haven't even gone on this one yet. It's 6 months away. But yes is the answer. Yes is the answer. I'm actually thinking about that for next year. Yeah. Yeah, we did a Footsteps of Paul trip, Greece and Rome. And this is where I always remember May 10th, day after Mother's Day. We were on the bus going, who's on that trip? Anybody? You did a different one? Yeah. But we're on the bus going to, we got our shuttle bus, we're on the way, and that's the day we had, it was about 4 years ago, we had 10 inches of snow. And like every flight in the country was being canceled. And as we're going, all of our phones are going up. Your flight's been canceled. We sat at the gate for about 4 hours, right in front of them, and said, we need a flight. And they're like, we don't have a flight. We'll wait. And after about 3 hours, like, they're serious. They're not leaving. So they got us a flight. And we were only set back about an hour. So. But yeah, it's another wonderful trip. So, there's lots of wonderful trips in the world. All right, any other questions? Anyone questions up there? 8:05, we're over our time. Sorry. Hey, let's close with a word of prayer, all right? The Lord be with you.
Also with you.
Thank you. Let's pray. Dear great and gracious God, we give you thanks that we have opportunities like this. We're excited about traveling to the place where you walk, where all the stories that we've heard throughout our lives have come alive. We're excited that this could be a place, a time, an experience that helps us draw closer to you. Bless us in our preparations, bless us in our work to make this trip happen so that we really can have a wonderful experience traveling together and really having a pilgrimage to the land holy. We thank you for this opportunity and for all that you do in our lives. In your name we pray.
Amen.
Thanks, everyone. We'll stick around for a little bit if you have any questions. All right. Thanks. Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Sorry about